Hey guys, welcome to today's podcast. Hey, listen, today we're going to be discussing how do you assess the risk in your business.
We're also going to be talking about what are the most risky businesses to be in at this time.
And today, I've just watched a documentary recently about the Boeing 747, and I want to have an open conversation about how Boeing literally avoided bankruptcy in order to create the world's best known and most successful airliner. For those who don't know, my name's Alasdair Cunningham. This is Tom Cook, and today we've got a very good show for you. How was your last week?
Fantastic, nice. Back in the new year.
What did you get up to last week? Come on, give me like one highlight of last week.
Last week went away to a luxury cabin for 2 nights, chilled out in the Lake District.
Really?
Jacuzzi and everything.
Where was that? In the Lake District?
Yeah, North Lake District, outside of Keswick. Perfect.
Keswick, that's almost Scotland, mate.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's quite
Keswick's right up there. It's right up there. I've been up there because I used to do a lot of kart racing, and there's a circuit up there called Rowra, so it's not far from Keswick. It's probably a half an hour, 40 minutes away.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's been a long time since I've been up. Yeah, it's nice to drive around. Of course, it rained.
Of course, it rained.
And it was windy.
Yeah, it rained and it's windy. Of course, but you had a break. You had a break. It's nice. Yeah. So today, what we want to talk about is how do you go about assessing risk in business? Now, many of you watching this will either have a business or you want to get into business. And a big factor that we always have to consider is the risk. What can we do to mitigate risk, and how do we assess the risks in, say, a chosen business? So how do you go about assessing risks whenever it comes to any sort of venture? Like recently, you were in the middle of purchasing a property. From a property purchase point of view, no, it didn't go through in the end because it didn't work. It didn't work out because the property didn't quite. There was other things came up. There was a few problems came up, so you did pull out. But in the process of investing in that property, that's just one example. What things were you looking out for from a risk point of view?
I always think, what's the worst case that can happen?
Yeah.
What is the absolute worst case scenario that can happen, and can I live with that? But the other thing that helps me is I like to do it with other people. Like, I don't want to do it on my own because then I can share the risk, basically.
Yeah.
But you've also got to think, if you're going into something, are you being a bit pig-headed and dumb about it, and are you being a bit careless? And the guy I was doing it, Regan I was doing it with, we put all the numbers together, we asked for help, we got different viewpoints from different people, and we knew that this system and this process worked, and all we were doing is just following the system. If I was doing it on my own, and I'd never been in that area before, I didn't know anybody who'd been in it, it would have been a different story and I probably wouldn't have done it.
Of course. I mean,
but the evidence was there that it would work.
It's very easy to walk through a big cornfield when somebody's walked through first.
Yeah.
And they've created the path for you. It's very, very easy to do that. But look at obviously from a property investment point of view, there's huge risk, right? You can risk losing everything. You can risk buying a dud property. But for instance, what can you do to prevent buying a dud property? Like a property that's got subsidence, huge structural problems, excessive damp, excessive rot. What can you do to prevent or to mitigate that risk as much as possible? It will never be zero risk. Trust me, I've done over 500 property deals. Every property deal comes with risk, but you want to do the property deals with as little risk as possible. So what did you do in this situation with your particular deal? What steps did you take to try and mitigate the risk of losing money? Now, obviously, fundamentally, the property didn't go through in the end for various reasons, because when you were doing your due diligence, things came up that made it didn't work as well as it should have worked.
Yeah, and we even lost a little bit of money, but you know what? That money that we've lost is the lessons learned. It hasn't set us back. We can still deal with it and we can still move forward.
Where did you lose money? You mentioned you lost money. Where did you lose money?
Architects, drawings, solicitor fees.
Yeah, so you went to professional services. So whenever you're doing like a property deal, right? Okay, so you've got to look at the risk involved, right? First things first is you need a good architect to help you with regards to future plans, drawings, and also just maximizing the usage of that building. Okay, that's not your expertise. No. It's an architect's expertise, so you have to pay them up front. They're not going to work for free, so obviously that costs you money. And after they've done that, that's when the problems started to occur, because you realize that they probably didn't really stack up as the way you thought it would do in the beginning. Okay, what else?
You got to go off your facts and not the opinions as well. I think a lot of people think, oh, it might do this, or I think it might do this. Yeah, that's great. What's the actual facts though?
Yeah, it's really funny, right? Because that's just reminded me of something. About a year and a half ago, I was in the process of buying a sort of it's like a commercial property in the middle of Bradford, okay? Now, this commercial property in Bradford was 3 floors upstairs. There was 3 floors, including the ground floor. So it was 4 floors in total, right? Ground floor was a shop, and then there was 3 floors above, and it used to be a clothing factory. And I was in the middle of like negotiating terms to buy it and all that sort of stuff, and I was hoping to get it on a commercial mortgage. Right, now here's the biggest problem. People get so tied up in commercial mortgages thinking that every property, I can just go for a commercial and I'll get a commercial. Now, I'm a bit more wiser than that. I realize that if you're going to do a commercial property, it has to be kind of unique and it has to be a commercial. And I remember somebody brought that deal to me and he said, look, I guarantee you'll get commercial lending on it. And I looked at the deal, I went and viewed it, and I'd done my assessment on it, I'd done my risk assessment on it, and I realized very quickly that I'm not going to get commercial lending on it. And he missed a very basic point. And the very basic point is, why is a bank going to lend £500,000 on this property when it's done up, when I can literally go 3 doors down and buy the exact same property for 100? And then do the conversion, which is going to cost 200,000. It doesn't make sense, right? So it's basic due diligence. You know, when you get good at doing due diligence, like your risk becomes way less, right? The people that I see that lose money in property deals in particular are the people that they skip through the due diligence. They've maybe attended a one-day event somewhere and they have no clue what they're doing, right? They have no clue how to do proper due diligence, and they just blasé the numbers. The risk is really high. Actually, when you dig deeper, you're going to understand that risk is very high and you're not going to make money, so pull out or don't do the deal. What was some of the big lessons you got from that deal?
Act faster. Act way faster. There was one of the big learnings for me was like where different people come into the process, where they fall into that.
Yeah.
And then I realized looking back that we'd brought in people too late. So going into the next one, I know next one where they need to come in and how quickly. Like for instance, architects. It took me a long time to bring them in because I thought they came in later in the process. But actually, next time we get an offer accepted, we're going to bring them in straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, from a risk point of view, that's property. Okay, property requires a lot of due diligence. Make sure you're doing that. So how would you assess risk? Let's move away from property. So go on.
I just want to add, because the property's not my full expertise.
Of course.
Yeah, I appreciate it and I love it and I want to get involved in it, and that's your thing. But I hear it, and I know a lot of people come to you where they're just starting, but they're going to take on a £5 million, £5 million block of flats.
Laughable, isn't it?
And
do you know how many people come to me? I remember I had a guy come to me once, right? He's never bought a house in his life. He still lives with his mum and dad, but he was trying to buy a shopping centre called Centre MK in Milton Keynes for £9 million. And I'm like, wake the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, wake the fuck up, mate.
Yeah, it's delusional.
You don't even know the basic buying process, but like you're trying to do some complex, complicated, long-term purchase of a commercial property that, by the way, you can't even afford your rent this month. Like, wake up. Like, honestly, we've had clients come to us where they've joined our property training and they've been doing really well, but maybe they've done a few, like, say, rent-to-rent deals, or they've done a few, like, standard sort of property source deals, and they've sourced on a few deals, maybe a couple of small terraces or something like that, okay? And then suddenly they're looking at hotels, they're looking at apartment blocks, and they think, well, it's the same deal, just bigger numbers. It's not, right? Doing a deal where you're buying a bit of land to develop on has costs that you've never even experienced. So again, it's about not running too fast, and walk before you run. Like, I've been doing property now since 2016. And it's only really in the last couple of years that I've really started looking at development in commercial property. And even then, I'm doing it with a lot of people around me who have been doing it for years. And not only that, I've got the money to do it, right? When you're coming into property, particularly property, right, and you haven't got a lot of money, then, start small and start humble. Because when you fuck up in property, it's a big fuck up.
Yeah.
It's not like you've gone out and you spent £1,000 on stock to try and sell to somebody. You're buying a house, or you're buying a property, a bit of land, or a development or whatever, and you're investing potentially your life savings or somebody else's life savings, and generally you're investing tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds. Yeah. Like, come on, wake up, right? If you've not done... Personally, I would say if you've not done at least 20 or 30 residential units, you shouldn't even be looking at bigger stuff. You shouldn't even be looking at land. You shouldn't even be doing any of that sort of stuff because you've got no experience in doing so. That's like me, you know, I can swim 2 or 3 lengths of the swimming pool, but that's like me entering the Olympics. Yep. It's not going to happen. Like, wake up, yeah? And that's just my advice. And honestly, we see it all the time, and it never works. Yeah. Like, so walk before you run when it comes to property. Understand the risk in property, and do your due diligence. Like, just do due diligence. And if you think you've done enough, do more. Do more, and then test it and stress test it. And then, you know, when you're ready, go to a broker and say, hey, look, this is my due diligence. What do you think?
People don't ask the questions. Whether it's in property, whether it's in business, whatever it is, people don't ask the questions, and they just assume, they just wait. Yeah. They go off their feelings and
emotions,
their emotions, and they don't sound check anything. We don't ask enough questions. You've got to ask questions. Learn from somebody who's been doing it.
So a couple of months back, we had a client of ours who just joined, super eager. And I get the eagerness, and I get that, you know, I want to get a deal, right? And they had this deal. I'm not going to say where it is because it's not fair to identify the person because they're trying, and it's not a criticism to their trying, okay? But what happened was they were trying to force the numbers because they'd spent so long in this deal that if they just followed the basic training that we gave, they would realize very quickly it's not going to work. But they got so emotional into the deal.
Yep.
Number one, it was near their house. Number two, like, they pass it every day. So number three, like, it's becoming emotional to them, right? So it was so emotional that they have to do this deal in their hometown. They're trying to, you know, they're coming up with these numbers. Hey, like, listen, it'll make all this money. And I'm like, well, how? And they say, yeah, but we can get £180 per night as a short-term let. And I'm like, how? Because if I go onto booking.com, I can book a immaculate property on the same street for £100 a night. So where are you getting £180 from? Oh, yeah, but I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I said, mate, no. Why? Why would I pay £180 a night for that small property when I can go to this luxury boutique place for £100 a night? It doesn't make sense because their emotions got involved. There's no room in business for your emotions. Yeah. Leave them at the fucking door. There's no room, right? And one of our most successful clients, Ellen McDonald, right? You might have heard of her. Ellen McDonald, great lass. Love her dearly, right? She's a really good friend of mine now, and she's a very good student, and she's also she works in our business now, and she helps us with the business. Great woman, right? Her biggest problem in her early days of her business was her emotions. Her emotions got in the way. And we used to have to tell her all the time, Ellen, look, leave your emotions at the door, and we don't want them in the room. Because when your emotions are in the room, your intelligence is very low, right? And she just, you know, she addressed that, she dealt with it, and she became a super successful woman.
Yeah, because when those feelings get involved, you start seeing what you want to see and not what is actually there.
Yeah.
You get confused. You get delusional. It's
like the little voice, isn't it?
Yeah.
When your emotions are quite high or they're involved in any sort of transaction, that little voice is singing an orchestra in the background.
Yeah. Your ability to think properly and logically just drops through the floor. And I've noticed this in people in business who are successful. They're quite cold about deals and opportunities. It doesn't mean that they're, you know, not a nice person or anything like that. I'm not saying that. It's just they're quite, when it comes back to the facts. Okay, what are the numbers? I've seen it so many times. Great, what are the numbers? Yeah, it's very placid about it.
Yeah. Like I've had clients and friends of mine that are like, hey, Alsa, you got to look at this. It's going to be super amazing, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Just email it to me. Yeah. Right. Honestly. And it's like, they're like, oh, you're not going to be excited about it. I said, no, just send me the numbers, mate. Because like, send me the details. Like, because there's no point in getting all excited about something because when you're excited, you're not thinking straight because you're trying to force something to work, whether it be a business, a property deal, anything. You're just trying to force it to work.
It's like on Dragon's Den. You know, okay, that's a bit of TV and it's probably like, there's a bit of
dramatization.
Yeah. But you never see him jumping up and down going, oh my God, that's an amazing deal. Oh my God, I want to get involved. Like, okay, what are the numbers?
Who's your favourite off Dragon's Den? In the history of Dragon's Den? I've got two.
I do like Deborah Meaden.
Do you?
Yeah.
I think she'd be an awesome woman to have in a business. I think she'd be amazing. I do like Deborah Meaden,
Yeah,
I love her. I love her like her sternness.
Takes no shit.
She takes no bullshit, does she?
Yeah, very calculated.
She'd be an interesting woman to be in a relationship with, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we get her on the podcast?
Oh, we can try. Hey, Debs, if you fancy it, come on. All right. What about my two favourite, Duncan Bannatyne. Absolutely love Duncan Bannatyne. I've read all of his books. I've followed his story from, ice cream vans to quality care homes. I remember reading Duncan Bannatyne's biography, and he talked about he was about to float quality care homes, his nursing home business. Yep. And he was doing all the final paperwork, right, before it was about to float. So it was like very early in the morning. Solicitors were all on the desk, and he's got this paperwork. And he goes through the invoice from the solicitor, and he has to sign it off and agree to pay it. And he gets to one of the lines, and I can't remember the amount, but it was like they tried to charge like £1,200 for like ancillaries and all that sort of crap. And he goes, well, what's that? What's that £1,200? I don't know the amount, but there was an amount. He goes, what's that amount there? And they said, oh, it's just for things like office, like admin stuff, like, pens, staples. And he went, no, you're charging me like £1,500 an hour. Like, I'm not paying that. That's ridiculous that you're charging me for pens, staples. And he probably kicked off. He said, no, deal's off.
Yeah.
Remove that or deal's off. He goes, I'll walk away from this right now. And it got into a big argument, and he actually left. He left, and he had to be. I think he did sign it in the end, but he got sort of persuaded to by his team, like, "Hey, mate, just like swallow your pride a little bit." But I love that. I love the fact that he stuck by his guns, and then I think he did. They come to an agreement in the end. But I love the fact that he called him out for that bullshit. And I don't like that. I don't like people taking the piss out of people just because they think they can. But yeah, Duncan Bannatyne, absolutely think he's a great guy, and I'd love to, be mentored or trained or work with him or do something where I'm working underneath him. And also Peter Jones.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Solid. I think he's a genius. I think he's also probably the most successful one on there ever. Yeah. Like, I actually think he is.
He's not on there anymore, though.
No, he's not on there anymore. But I believe he's the most successful ever dragon. Yeah. Like, from a financial standpoint, and he does a lot more than what most people know. Like, he's very, very involved in a lot of businesses, but you wouldn't know necessarily what he's involved in. And it's really quite interesting.
Yeah. So what do you think then? Because obviously those guys are all about calculated risk.
Yeah.
How do you manage risk?
How do I manage risk? Well, one, I'm not scared of risk, right? A lot of people are scared of risk, and I'm not scared of it. I see risk, it's hand in hand with making money. It's hand in hand with achieving anything. Like, the people that aren't prepared to take any risk generally achieve nothing, right? Warren Buffett said, I didn't become one of the wealthiest investors in the world by taking no risk. And I agree completely. Now, I take risk all the time, and I win and I lose. I've done property deals that are a bit risky, and guess what? Sometimes they've come off, sometimes they haven't. But I've come off better more than I've lost in these deals. Does that make sense? So yeah, while I might lose a bit on some deals, I make on other deals. Like, I've got properties right now that don't make any money. Right? They don't make any money on a cash flow basis because, perhaps I've tried them in a different strategy and it's not worked. So I'm having to move them to a different strategy. But they make equity. So you're not always going to win at all times, and you just have to accept that. So how do I manage risk? Number one, I do a lot of due diligence on everything I'm doing, whether it be a business, whether it be a joint venture, a loan agreement, anything I'm doing, I do a lot of due diligence on the people involved, right? Like, a lot of the people involved. Like, for you, for instance, Tom, we're business partners. Like, we've got to know each other over the last 5 years? 2021? Yeah. 4 years? 2020. 4 years, right? So I've done my due diligence on you. So by getting to know you. Like, likewise, if I was to do a joint venture with anyone watching this, I'm not giving you money until I know who you are. I'm not giving you money till I know you're credible. I'm not giving you money just because you've asked for it. I'm going to do due diligence on you to mitigate my risk, to lower my risk, okay? Property deals, I do a lot of due diligence. I've got a very good power team. So I've got a good architect, I've got a good solicitor, and I've got a good builder that I can work with to do and verify due diligence. When it comes to business investments, I've got a good mentor that I can go to and ask them to assess businesses and help me assess businesses and the risk of doing that. And again, I lean into risk. Once I've assessed a business or whatever it is I'm doing, right, I lean into it. I understand it, I lean into it, and I double down. And it's as simple as that. And I want to try and make as much money as possible. And I'm prepared to lose money to make money. And there's an interesting stat, and we'll move on after this. Billionaires are prepared to lose millions to become billionaires. Millionaires are prepared to lose tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands to become millionaires. Broke people aren't prepared to lose anything to become rich. And that when I saw that statement once online, that made me really realize that actually that is so true. And most people that don't have a lot, they want to get rich without risking anything. But the reality is you're not going to get anything until you start risking things, but calculated. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah. What was what was going through your head when you got the office? And we moved into HQ.
Oh, blimey. Okay, so we're currently filming from our headquarters. So we've got a big office in Leeds city centre. So if you're ever in Leeds, by all means, pop in and say hey. But we're in Leeds city centre. We've got a big office, and it comes with a significant investment. We had to commit to a long lease. We had to commit to a monthly amount of money that has to be paid regardless of whether we make money or not. So I had to assess the risk of moving into here over the next 5 to 10 years. I had to assess the affordability, the viability. Are we going to use it? And yeah, it's one of these things, like, you just have to look into it. You have to assess it. You have to assess the viability. Can the business afford it? What happens if? Yeah. Like, it's a big thing. What happens if, okay? But yeah, we just, I make decisions very quickly, right? And you'll often find people of wealth, people that have got money, however much money, but people that have got money, right, are happy to take risk and are happy to make decisions quickly. Like, people that don't have much take forever to make decisions. People that are, that are just like in their 9 to 5, they take forever to make a decision. They want to consult every man, Tom, Dick, and Harry, including their fucking dog, to make a decision about anything. And it's boring. Like, I know people that make like serious big decisions in a matter of minutes. Like, honestly, like, I went to a property viewing once, right? And this property was on the market. It was a property that was on the market for 160,000. You were with me. We went to an auction, and I made the decision that day, within a matter of minutes, that I was going to buy that property, right? Literally within a matter of minutes. Now, I'd done a little bit of due diligence beforehand, but not much. Now, the problem I had was I was at an auction. You're in a heated environment of male testosterone and ego, where people are trying to outbid each other, and it's like a big fucking dick swinging competition where everyone's trying to do better than the other, because it's like, hey, I'm going to win. I had to remain calm, make a decision, and make it happen. I did. Guess what? That property made me, I just got paid back from that property last week. So I now own that property. I own all the equity in that property, and I got paid back like £60,000 last week or the week before. Yeah, all because I made a decision, an educated decision. Okay. Now, moving on. What area, what sector of business do you think is the highest risk? Give me one. If you were to start a business today, and if you've got people watching this right now, and if they said to you, hey, Tom, I've got this amazing idea, I'm going to start a business in this sector, what area would you say is the one to avoid from the highest risk point of view?
For me, personally, I think it's anything if you're manufacturing anything.
Interesting.
Because then you got to sort out the material, you got to sort out the machinery or the staff to do all of that. So then there's suddenly a lot of overheads to make that happen, and you're probably going to have to take investment on. And you don't necessarily know if whatever you're creating is going to work. So I personally, for me, I think that's probably one of the riskiest ones.
Okay. I kind of agree with you, but you can mitigate that quite a lot. Yeah. So, for instance, let's say you want to manufacture a flujimadoo, right? Just whatever a flujimadoo is, right? Just a flujimadoo, a Watsy gadget, a Watsy bob, right? Whatever, right? A thing, right? Whatever. Why don't you? Here's what you can do. Why don't you, get 5 manufactured? So you've got demos, yeah? You can hold it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can show it, you can demonstrate it. Why don't you then pre-sell them? Pre-sell. Let's say it's a flujimadoo that you're selling for £25. Why don't you pre-sell them? Yeah, get them pre-sold and get orders coming in. And then, once you've got the orders coming in and you've been paid for the orders, right, then you can get the manufacturing done, right? Maybe you can outsource that manufacturing. Then, you've got a proven product. The problem I see with manufacturing industry is people go out and they create all the products without even knowing if they can sell it.
Yeah, they don't.
There's a big difference.
They don't research
right?
it.
There's a big difference. So I wouldn't do that. So I agree with you. It's quite a risky business. The biggest problem you've got with manufacturing is unfortunately China. Because, China can produce anything you can produce in the United Kingdom at a fraction of the cost. It won't be as good, but they can definitely produce it. Like, we've got a client of ours, Magnus from Stockholm. He sells bags. So he sells backpacks and bags. Biggest problem he's got is the manufacturing cost. because obviously he's got to buy a minimum order quantity of, I think, 250. These bags are like £75 each. He sells them for a bit more than that, obviously, otherwise there's no profit in it. But in order for him to sell it, in order for him to bring the stock in, he either has to take a punt and buy loads of stock, or he pre-sells it, maybe even sells it just 10% above cost or 10% profit margin, whatever, just to get some sales, get some movement, get some action, and then he can bulk order. But yeah, manufacturing is a big risky business. For me, it's hospitality. Yeah. For me, it's hospitality industry. And what I mean by the hospitality industry, I don't necessarily mean hotels, because I think hotels are booming. And I think service accommodation and short-term lets and Airbnb, Booking.com are, I think definitely, if you do it in the right area, is booming. I'm talking more about restaurants.
Yep.
Go down any high street, it's full of restaurants. And if you go down most high streets and on a Tuesday night, they're empty. Okay, restaurants statistically fail in the first year unless they've got something really unique about them. But everyone thinks, hey, open a restaurant because everyone has to eat, right? The problem we got is we've got inflation rising, we've got interest rates at certainly a peak in the last 10 years. We've got cost of living going up. People have less money in their pockets and they're not eating out as much. So, restaurants for me are like I would never invest in anything to do with food or restaurants, because if literally go down a high street, there's 101 takeaways, there's 101 restaurants, half of them are shit, right? Let's be real, right? Yeah. They're all shit. Yeah. Let's be real, right? Even these Michelin star branded named restaurants, they're shit. Right? Unless you're going to start going into big cities and start going to the, for instance, the Sexy Fish and the Cobas and all these places, the really high-end restaurants. Most restaurants nowadays are shit. They serve microwaved, pre-cooked food, and who wants that nowadays? So I wouldn't go into the restaurant business at all.
It's also, you're right, that's actually a really good one. And it's they can't find the staff either. There's a difficulty to get chefs, skilled labour, and it's difficult to actually just...
You mean a chef or somebody that can operate a microwave?
All of them. Your waitresses, your waiters. I know people who work in the hospitality industry, and they have such a hard time finding staff. Yeah. And people who want to work.
Well, that's an interesting topic, isn't it? Yeah. That's a very interesting topic. People that want to work. Hey, listen, we live in a population, I'm sorry to say, but we do live in a population where we have a certain group of people within our population that are just entitled. They just don't want to work. And they blame illegal immigration. They blame this. They blame that. They've got a fucking blame for everything. But the reality is they're just lazy and they don't want to work. If you were the government, what would you do about benefits?
I wouldn't scrap it, because genuinely some people do need it. But I think there's got to be tighter controls on who gets it and who doesn't. I would be
cutting that motherfucker up in half, and I'd be so strict with it. I would be stopping these benefits 100%. Listen, I don't care. I'd be stopping these benefits. Now, if you're of working age, you work, or you sort yourself out. I don't do entitlement. I don't do entitlement. I do not do it. If you're genuinely disabled, and I'm not just saying, I've got a sore back and I can't bend over. I mean, if you're genuinely disabled, no problem. But unfortunately, we live in a world where people, they just want to play the system. And not everybody, of course, not everybody. There's a huge, I know so many people that just want to play the system. And they play the system and they're not living great lives, but they're playing the system because they're just fucking lazy. I wouldn't do it.
Well, that's the problem. There are people who genuinely need it, and then they end up losing out because there's this huge portion of people who don't need it. And they're, like you say, they just play the system.
Yeah, play the system. All right, anyway, listen, moving on. In the news, right, I've been studying a lot about Boeing. Right, I've been watching. If you, can
I just say he's come to me on multiple occasions saying, "Do you know what? I was watching this program last night on Boeing."
I've got very into documentaries about businesses that have nearly gone bankrupt, but then become a huge success, right? So you all know Boeing. There's basically two big airliners in the world, Airbus or Boeing, right? And now here is, I don't know if you know the Boeing story, okay, but it's actually really interesting. The most popular airplane in the world, and it's sold the absolutely most, and there's more of them than any other airplane, is the Boeing 747. And it's the wide body 747 where you've got seats on the side and seats in the middle, yeah? And it was the spearhead of creating that. Now, do you know how it come about?
Go on.
Right, okay, so do you remember Pan Am? Pan Am Airways, okay? That was the Pan American airline, and it was the biggest airliner, okay? Well, the owner of Pan Am, he went to both Airbus and Boeing, and he said, listen, he goes, I want to make more money from the same journey, so we need bigger planes. Now, back in the day, planes were just, they could only host about 100 people. Seats were super wide, they could only have about 100 people. So Pan Am went to Boeing and also Airbus and said, I want a plane where we can get more people on because then we can get more money. Simple as, yeah? Now, they all said they couldn't do it because of the science and they hadn't gone that big, right? They all said they couldn't do it. So he said, well, listen, I want to order 8 planes and we want to place an order now. So either you do it, Boeing, or I'm going to go to Airbus and they're going to do it, right? So Boeing, the owner of Boeing, I can't remember the gentleman's name, he said, okay, fine, we'll do it. And they shook hands on it. And they didn't agree prices or anything. They just shook hands on it and said, yeah, we'll create it. We'll come up with a plan. Give us a period of time and we'll draft a plan for you and then we'll agree terms, all right? So within a matter of months, they drew out this building, this plane, and they went back to Pan Am and they secured the contract for 8 planes for the next deliverable within 2 years. So they basically, what happened was they wanted to carry more people, but they couldn't make the plane bigger, longer, okay? So they decided, okay, number one, they could go double-decker, right? Now, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, when this all came around, they couldn't go double-decker because of health and safety, because if the plane crashed, you've got to jump out the top, right? And they couldn't figure that out. So they said, let's not do that. So that's when they came up with the wide-body plane. Yeah. So they went wide instead of up. And it was genius, right? It was absolutely genius. However, Boeing committed to, producing 8 of these planes for Pan Am, but they gave themselves just 2 years to do it. That's from design, build, and get out there and get working. Get it flying. Right? 2 years. That's huge. It nearly bankrupted Boeing. Like Boeing literally got to a point where they had to lay off 6,000 members of staff. They couldn't make payroll, and it was all.
Why was that though?
That was because obviously Pan Am weren't going to pay any money until the planes were available. So they'd already liquidated all cash. They were putting huge millions and millions and millions of pounds into developing this wide-bodied Boeing 747. They had to create multiple jet engines. It's a new power system, new hydraulic system, everything. It was genius, absolutely genius. Now, they had 4 engines on the plane. I found out why. I always wondered why this was. Because when Boeing done the original test flight for the 747, the engine was unreliable. They kept blowing up. Whenever they gave them full thrust, the engines just used to shit themselves. And it turns out it was to do with the cowling, and they lost, I think, 8 engines. It's £16 million an engine, right? In test.
You'd be devastated.
I'd be gutted, mate. But here's the thing, right? So they had the test flight coming up, yeah? But they had these 4 engines on, obviously Boeing 747 had 4 engines on it. Why do you think they had 4 engines?
I'll tell you.
Because the engines were so unreliable.
Just in case.
Just in case.
A backup plan.
It was literally just in case. So, because if one of them failed, they could still have more engines. That's why they had 4 engines on them. But when they had the test flight, it was in the late 70s, I believe it was, they had the plane on the runway and they employed a test pilot and they basically said to him, look, you might die, right? And he's like, oh, okay. Whatever. So he got on the plane and he didn't give it full thrust to take off, because if they gave it full thrust, they were worried the engine was going to blow up. But everything relied on this test flight. And reality is the plane took off, it done an hour flight and landed, but they lost 1 engine. Nobody knew about it. Right? They lost 1 engine on takeoff, but nobody knew because it didn't create a drama, okay? And they managed to turn it down, all that sort of stuff. It's a genius story, mate. And then what happened was test flight took off, they got paid, everything was saved, and the business flourished. It became one of the most successful airlines in the world, sold tens and tens and tens of thousands of Boeing 747. At the minute, there's Boeing 747s flying all around the world, and it became the flagship for Boeing. But this just shows you, right? Talk about risk. Yeah. Look at the risk. Boeing literally risked their name, their business, tens of thousands of jobs, millions and millions, if not billions of pounds worth of revenue on the back of somebody saying, hey, I'm going to go to Airbus. Yeah. Right, look at that, right? It's insane, right? So remember, your business can be on the verge of bankruptcy, and then a year later can be booming. Absolutely booming.
It can change so
right?
quickly.
It can change so quickly. Just imagine if Boeing quit, just for that test flight because an engine went. Yeah. They lost an engine, and then they give up. Yeah. Just imagine, where would Boeing be? Look at all the tens of thousands of people that they employed. Look at all the income. Now they're one of the most successful airliners in the world. And it's just like, imagine if they quit just because things were... Do you think it was stressful during that period?
I imagine there would have been quite a bit of stress.
I imagine there's a hell of a lot of stress.
Imagine being responsible for 10,000 people.
Imagine the meetings. Imagine the boardroom meetings when another engine just shat itself.
16 million.
Yeah, and this is 16 million back then.
Yeah.
It's not 16 million today. Like, it's back then. That's a significant amount of money, right? So it just shows you, look, they looked and assessed their risk. They understood their risk, they leaned into their risk, and they understood that in order to make a lot of money, they've got to take that risk. They did, they become huge, and they become an absolute success.
Yeah. And they got so far down the rabbit hole that they just had to keep going.
Yeah, we say that all the time about business, don't we?
You can't just stop halfway and go, oh no, it's too scary now.
Well, that's the thing. And this is where the courage comes in. Like at Valiant Education, okay, we think, so Valiant Education is our company, okay? And we focus on 3 things, helping you become more valuable, more visible, and more vocal, but giving you the courage to do so, okay? Because if you want to do anything in business, you're going to have courage. Would you agree? If you do, like, tell me down below in the comments, like, what's the big thing that's stopping you right now, for instance, that you know you have to lean into? Like literally, tell me in the comments, what is the big thing that's stopping you achieving what you want to achieve? And if you tell me in the comments, I'll address it and I'll help you overcome that, right? We teach people how to have courage to do what they've got to do, even though they don't want to. And I truly believe that you're going to become successful when you do what you've got to do when nobody's watching and when everyone is against you. When, like, everyone's against you. Who's the gentleman that started Gymshark? Was it Ben Francis?
Yeah.
I saw a podcast with Ben Francis the other day, an interview with him, and he said, he was asked, did you get your company from like 6 figures to 1 million and then 1 million to 10 million? And he said, listen, everyone's going to tell you it's going to fail. Everyone's going to moan at you. Everyone's going to say you're taking too much risk. Everyone's going to say, don't do this, don't do that. But you've got to be able to shut that noise out and know what you want to do and just say, I'm doing it. You either support me or you leave, right? Because I'm doing it. And you're going to have people try and stop you doing what you want to do in your business. You're going to have people advise you that that's risky, you shouldn't do that. But you have to then say, look, I know it's going to work. We're going to make it work. So you join me and support me or you leave. And he said you kind of have to be a little bit of a dictatorship in order to get to that level. And I think it's so true. And part of being a dictatorship is having the courage to follow it through.
Yeah. It's because other people will try and tell you that you can't do it, but they don't have your vision. They don't know what you want because they don't know who you are because they're not you. So they have no right to tell you whether you can or you can't do it. So you have got, if you know that you want something and you've got a vision of something, there's something you want to achieve, a business that you want to grow, something that you want to move into, then fucking go after it. And nobody can tell you otherwise because they can't see it because they're just living life through their own experiences. And you've just got to have the courage to go, do you know what? I know what I want. Yes, I'm scared. I've got some fear, but screw it. I'm actually going to do it anyway. And I'm going to take that step. For instance, I wanted to quit my job. At the time, Brexit was happening, and my mum, through all her love, was saying, Tom, don't quit yet. Don't go just yet. Wait, allow Brexit to play out. Get that sorted first, and then maybe quit your job. And I appreciate that, and I know she was coming from good intentions. For me, I knew what I wanted, and I knew I wanted to quit that job, and nothing was going to stop me. And there's always going to be something that happens, because I quit my job, and then 3 months later, COVID happened, and everyone went into lockdown. I'm not going to let that stop me. You have to keep going on something. If there's something that you really want, and maybe you change the route that you go towards it, but if there's something that you want, go after it.
We'll finish on 2 things. It's not their vision, it's your vision. Mm-hmm. And secondly, if you're not scared, you're not doing enough. Yeah. Right? As simple as that. If you're not scared, you're not doing enough, right? Nobody got rich by being comfortable. All right. On that bombshell, we're going to finish up from today. My name's Alasdair Cunningham.
My name's Tom Cook.
I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Make sure you're tuning in next week. If you found today's show useful, comment below and tell us it was shit. Doesn't matter. Either way, peace out. Much love. See you next time.